Okay. Surround myself with like-minded people as much as possible. Okay. So you guys bring me joy. And I center my week on teaching this class. And it always feels really wonderful after a class with you guys. So I really appreciate that. In a way, it's a form of self-care because I want it to be us caring for ourselves and looking at ourselves through the lens of these plants. Oh, someone took an energy healing class from Katrina Horn. Good for you. I didn't know about that. Oh, great. Yay. Awesome. I'm all about Katrina Horn and everything that's coming from Australia right now. For some reason, it feels like source energy. So, yay. Awesome. So, let's get started on our class today. I think we have enough people online now. Each time I'm about to prepare a class, I'm just in the moment of thinking, what is going to serve us? I was going to teach a class on COVID, but I got some feedback that there's been enough of that, homeopathic remedies for that. And I agree. And we have so much to cover with plant remedies. So I just launched into plants and I was thinking, oh man, our class is falling on Day of the Dead in Samhain, which is also the end of the harvest year, and Halloween being yesterday, and a blue moon and Mercury retrograde. So thinning of the veil, and you name it. There's a lot going on right now, and elections kind of coming through. So I decided to build our class material today around remedies that have the themes of the words associated with darkness, evil, witch, devil, all of that. I woke up with the in excess, everyone's got a devil inside in my head. It started, I have this kind of a story where I took Eva to the dentist. She had cavities. I gave her strep mutans. I took strep mutans and had a real reaction, like felt the energy of an old tooth of mine that I lost and had replaced, and the cavity that was in there from taking the strep mutans. And then all this stuff came out with some friends of mine, this kind of dramatic energy that I couldn't clear. It felt like just drama. And then Hyos came up. So I took Hyos, and I've never taken Hyos before. We're going to talk about that remedy today. And I woke up with that song in my head. Everyone's got the devil inside. And we do. I do. You do. We all do. It's the shadow that makes us us. Okay. And so these remedies that we're talking about shadow and light and dark. And remedies to look at the parts of us that we reject. So shadow being a word for like, what do we reject? So I looked up the devil, witch, evil, monster, and Satan on reference works. In top remedies, we're going to talk about a bunch of them, but I've reviewed other ones of them. Lachesis. We've talked about animal remedies, kind of come up a lot with that, because we're talking about the reptilian brain and the subconscious as well. But remedies in the Solanaceae family, which is one of the most important remedy families for us to be studying. So we'll be talking about that. I decided to talk about the plant family of the pumpkin. Why is the pumpkin everywhere this time of year? The squash family probably it's partially because the squashes are ripe right now, but they also represent being really hardworking in the fall, stinginess, and also this kind of like the pumpkin is anti-parasitic. So I love that. I love the fact that kids are eating candy, igniting their parasites. And then you've got this orange glowing globe with this face that's trying to, scare away the evil entities. And essentially what we should be doing is eating those seeds, right? Eating those seeds at the time of Halloween. Probably we should be handing out pumpkin seeds packets. Somebody should invent that. Halloween packets that are like really colorful but have seeds in them. So one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, by just being like, oh, we're all angels, but by making the darkness conscious. That's Jung. That's Jung's quote, making the darkness conscious. Jung and Freud are essentially the two psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, psychologists who developed that field and concept of the shadow, right? And it's not even that long ago. I think we all understand what shadow means. And I would really love for you all to just write words down that you consider represent shadow. Like, what are words that are in our culture, our own shadow, that are other people's shadow, are qualities that we kind of reject in people. Anger, perfect. Alter ego, yes. Hidden, the dark shadow. Yeah, cruelty, abuse, absolutely. Greed, specter, addiction, fear, unpredictability, right? Yeah. I mean, I wrote some things: lies, deception, guilt, shame, pain, sexuality, you know, there's a lot there that is in the shadow. Violence, you know, in our culture, the shadow is uncontrolled infection right now, you know, death, COVID taking over and like just killing everybody. This idea that like we're not in control. We're not in control through the medical system. We're not in control through our government or institutions, that this kind of uncontrollable destruction will take place, as it has in over millennia. Over, you know, destruction is always kind of happening on this planet. What do we reject in our own children? You know, we reject qualities always in kids. Don't pick your nose, you know, don't masturbate. Things like that. I mean, what do we tell children? Children are learning constantly what to put into their bag, what to shove into their conscious. You move too much, you know. Don't smear food all over your face. What is it that you tell your kids all the time? I mean, we're trying to kind of civilize the animal out of our children. And then we have this idea of what is normal for kids, and we create the shadow of what is not normal for how children need to be, you know. And I remember reading somewhere that it's like the most like polite, civilized people that have the craziest kids, because they're repressing so much, and then it kind of comes out in their kids. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I've seen all sorts of children with all sorts of parents, but shadow, we attempt to control it, you know, like the more the fear comes up, the more the subconscious comes up, the more control, you know, hence all the COVID control, and attempts at control through mass vaccination, for example. The remedies that kind of put a damper on top of the intense inflammation that could be there, that suppression is a layer that's there. So we'll be talking about that in some cases today. When we really get into it, without the dark, there wouldn't be light. Without the light, there wouldn't be dark. Without the shadow, there wouldn't be us. We all operate on some level based on our fears. You know, I could be here today because I was like a shaking, scared child in bed that was afraid of zombies. You know, it propelled me in some direction. And I would wager to guess that you had fears as a child that propelled you in one direction or another. Abandonment, you know, loneliness, abuse, perfection, fear of failure. So all of that creates us. Yeah. So we can't, what do we do as a culture to heal, to heal the shadow? I mean, there's psychoanalysis, there's homeopathy, but there's also sports and dance and art and movies. When guys are sitting there drinking beer and watching a game, they're like releasing something, and then sometimes they get rowdy, right? It's getting something out of them. And when we're watching a romance movie, we're like getting our own like juiciness on. It moves us, and we connect to that part of us through so many things. Is there anything that you guys really like to do to kind of tap into your, in a way, we're talking about first and second chakra too, sexuality and root and fears, journaling. I feel like just sitting there and oming and meditating sometimes can bypass that, right? And so for me, working with homeopathy and doing sensation process, we're always trying to get people to see what's in their shadow. That's why I like to have people close their eyes, because you make them go inside. You close your eyes, it's dark, right? So we're going into the darkness. A great thing to see what's in the shadow is like, what is dark? When I say dark, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? You can do a meditation where you walk people down into a basement. You're walking, you're in your house, you go down to the basement, it's dark, you don't know what's down there. What do you see? So leading people through meditations like that, into the darkness, into the basement, down, helps people kind of see that. And it's important because those are the roots. That's where the root to so many things are. Treating symptoms it's just out here. Getting into the shadows, the root. I posted in our group this cool writing about light and dark, and light is conscious awareness, and where there's no awareness, there's darkness, the unknown. Unrealized energy is the darkness. So we're just realizing what's there. We're bringing awareness. For me, giving a homeopathic remedy is saying, be aware of this. This is what this is. Accept it and even love it. It's a way of like forgiving the guilt for being there, or forgiving the exhibitionism. Oh, you like to just show off your parts. It's okay. Take hiatus. You can let it go. So, yeah. Inside of each of us is the light of conscious awareness, and the shadow it creates is the darkness of the unknown. Shadow is the concept for our personal unknown. Today is Day of the Dead too. And what I've been like really digging is I've started doing some kind of family constellations where I like channel the family ancestors. Our ancestry is such a treasure trove for a personal unknown. And if we can like dig into like the traumas of our ancestry, we're able to just heal so much, right? So it's important to learn about ourselves and our ancestors. And at the end of class, I'm going to do a meditation where we call on an ancestor as well, since that's today. Yeah, let's see. Universe, source, God, light, all, light, angels, our third eye, vision, it's all about bringing light and awareness to the dark. It doesn't take much for a little bit of light to completely open up the darkness, right? My neighbor, he said that light eats the darkness. It's an interesting idea, right? And so it's like, it literally, you bring a tiny shard of light into the darkness, and the darkness just starts to dissipate. So you don't need much light to bring it in. Okay. So that's a bit of my conversation on the light and the dark, but we'll keep going into it as we go along. So any comments on that? On the light and the dark and the shadow? So we'll get into that with the Solanaceae family. I have my notes. I'll put my notes up for you guys. And I do have like pictures of the plants, but I have so many remedies that I want to cover today that I think I'm just going to show some plant pictures at the end when we have time. So the pumpkin family, you know, this is fun. How many of you guys carved a pumpkin or love pumpkins? And they're orange. Orange, what chakra is orange? It's like the second chakra. It's like creativity. And during this time, I feel like when we tap into our shadow, often it's our sexuality and it brings out our creativity. It can bring out our life force. You know, when we put on our costumes, we become our alter ego. We either become like the sexy villain or like the scary monster or the witch. You know, it's like, it's whoever, like maybe we've rejected and who we really want to be. It's kids, you know, whatever animal they really want to be. So I think it's great. It's just so powerful. Remedies in this family includes Bryonia alba, and I'm going to touch on Bryonia alba because this is the one of the most important COVID remedies. Colosynthis is one of the most important remedies for gut stuff that I've used a lot in ASD kids. And then the rest of them are kind of like neither here nor there, but I'm going to touch on them. So I don't know if you guys knew this story, but the jack-o'-lantern origins come from an Irish myth about Stingy Jack. And I love it that I found this out because this really fits this family. So he's Stingy Jack. He tricked the devil for his own monetary gain. So he wanted to make money, tricks the devil. And when he dies, God doesn't let him into heaven and the devil doesn't let him into hell. So he roams earth forever and haunts everybody. And they put out the pumpkin to keep him away. And this is perfect for what the pumpkin gourd cucumber family. I still haven't quite settled on what name because actually Sankran in his schema, he calls it the Violes family. Then I read elsewhere, it's the gourd family. I read elsewhere, it's the bitter cucumber or the cucumber family and the gourd family. So everywhere I read about it, it's got a different name. So you guys get the idea though. You know what these plants are. So when Irish immigrants came to the US, they started carving jack-o'-lanterns from the pumpkins. So stinginess is very much a part of this plant family. This idea that we need to be hardworking and productive, and I'm afraid that my resources are going to be taken away. Think of, you know, hardworking Irish people, and you know, famine's just around the corner, and you've got to really, sow these seeds, and so it's this fear. It's earthbound fears. You know, am I going to have enough money? Am I going to have enough food? And I'm working really hard out of that fear. And what that does is I'm afraid this is going to be taken away, and you work. It's very, if you know the miasms, it's very soric. So you're coming from this place of lack. I don't have enough. And so I need to keep working hard because I don't have enough. That's soric. Right? So energetically, like the real important sensation to get, because so many remedies are soric, is there's a sharp stabbing feeling with this family. A one word they use in homeopathy is lancinating, like you're being stabbed with a knife. Stitching, pinching, kind of like, it's just like this. What it is it's a stagnation. It's like a heat. A really keen example of this is appendicitis. And it's important for you guys to know, just medically, that appendicitis occurs between the belly button and the top of the right hip. So between that spot, it usually starts a little bit closer to the belly button, like this is my belly button, this is my hip, and like somewhere in between that. And if there's sharp pain there, It's often appendicitis. Bryonia is a great remedy for appendicitis, but it's a sharp kind of pain. Let's see. Yeah, it is. You know, it's not the only remedy for appendicitis, but it is an important one. I think it's the most important remedy for appendicitis. So what do you do when you have sharp pain or you're just like in pain? When you need this type of remedy, you don't want to move, because when you move, you're using up your resources. Like even just the tiny, just movement at all is just too much, and you don't want to be bothered. It's like, leave me alone. I just want to sit on the couch. Like I just want to veg out. Okay. So there would be irritable or bitter when questioned. Leave me alone. Throwing things, even just like, just really like, this is, I'll show you some cases that really represent this. So Yakir's book, the energy of this family is accumulation, conserving in order to give to your children, like put them through college, right? Being productive. It isn't the kind of generosity where I'm like trying to like feed the world. It's the kind of generosity trying to kind of build up just enough so that you can move your family forward and get through this immigration fear or whatever it is. Fear of poverty, fear of financial catastrophe. And there's a kind of a dryness as well, especially in Bryonia, out of this kind of stinginess. Scholten writes, they have a strong drive to make money and have a good business due to fear of poverty. All of their stuff gets really exaggerated if they lose their business or their money. How much does our American society freak out if our economy starts to kind of bottom out, right? It's like this country and New York City and all these people, it's just like we've built up so much wealth, way more wealth than what is like really needed for most people, right? Like most Westerners have more than we need, yet we're so afraid, right? And it's no wonder that this remedy is good for COVID and arsenicum, right? And nux vomica. These are all remedies that are very similar, cold, fearful of financial ruin, working hard. Often they have a family business, father's domineering, angry, explosive. In the cases of special needs kids I've seen, they're kids who their moms were hardworking while pregnant. So they're doing this and they're doing this and they're not taking the time to just sit down and take care of their bodies and relax a bit. They're just like, taking it all on. So it's interesting. One thing I would like to say, and I'm saying this because I'm half Chinese, is that there's a good handful of my cases that are Asian of this plant family. Asia and China has this quality, this hardworking, productive, don't want to lose money, fear of poverty kind of thing. The immigrants push through, make your kids work hard, like irritable, and making it happen. So a lot of the cases that I have are actually from Hong Kong, Singapore, honestly, in my own family too, where this energy is there on the Asian side. So that's, there is certain cultures have their qualities and draw in certain remedy types. With the Solanaceae today, you may see, oh God, it feels so Italian. The Italians, they like totally tomatoes and all of the kind of the nightshade energy has that bigness to it. So I just have to say that, and COVID coming out of China and this like fear of deficiency. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? When we're living in such an excessive, humanity is living out its excess, and we're feeling like basically what, like our culture is just maybe about to kind of hit rock bottom, or not hit rock bottom, but what is it? Crumble as the earth starts to crumble. So bryonia, feeling deficient, you don't want to exert any extra effort. There was somebody in our class whose family member got COVID, and I could feel it through the stages, and he went to the hospital and got a lot of medications and came back home. And the first remedy I had him take was bryonia. And it's that feeling of like, oh my God, what's happened to me? Like, I just feel like shit and I don't want to move, like that feeling, like just don't bother me. So there's this, all business, hasty in manner, homebodies, conservative and anxious. I mean, if you're chronic, most cases of bryonia that you'll see will be acute flus or appendicitis, as all sorts of physical. It's kind of like an arnica type of remedy where there's all sorts of physicals that it can help with. The physical is that I don't want to use up the energy in my body because of this thing going on. I just need to shut down and you need to not bother me. Maybe even labor, can be this way. Or after labor, postpartum. Let's see. Painful joints, headaches, flu, coughing, whereas somebody who chronically needs this might be somebody who's had lots of immune dysfunction, a lot of like colds, and they're just sitting at home and they work from home and they're kind of like, maybe they're like, kind of a conservative, a little bit dry person, maybe like an IT person, for example. Not to over characterize, but I'm thinking of somebody I know. So would bryonia or arsenicum be the first line remedy for COVID cases? Arsenicum is what a lot of people put out there as first line. Aconite, it depends on where they are, and you have to, every case is different, right? And so I guess a good question is how to differentiate arsenicum and bryonia. Arsenicum wants somebody. They're like, doc, please help me. Bryonia doesn't. How would you differentiate bryonia and nux vomica? And somebody look that up for me and tell me, because let's see, nux vomica is a little bit more in the nervous system, and maybe bryonia is maybe more in the joints. They'll both be irritable. When I meet a nux vomica person, I get intimidated by them. They look me dead in the eye, and they're that kind of person where it's just like they're like not there to mess around. They want their stuff. They want to be healed. They're really serious. There's a kind of a masculine energy. It could be a man or a woman that needs the nux, but their energy almost is very directed. Whereas a bryonia person is really like, leave me alone. So I'll show you in the cases. Let's see, I have a lot of Lyme and joint pain. Bryonia is magic for that inflammation. Thank you. Yeah, so maybe bryonia being a little bit more around the joints. Colosynthis is this type of melon. The feeling of colosynthis is, Sankaran puts colosynthis in the malarial miasm. The malarial miasm is like kind of the parasite oppressed. There's something kind of really oppressing me, taking me down. I'm stuck in this bad situation, but I'm stuck with it. And so it makes me angry and impatient, and I hold it inside. It's like in my gut. So the feeling of colosynthis is that you have this sharp stabbing feeling in the gut, and it's coming from withheld emotions that is usually anger. So it's holding the emotions inside. And then what makes it feel better is hunching over. So you're hunching over, sometimes even like pushing something into your belly. Sounds like kind of a menstrual cramp thing too. I'm just angry. There's kids who need this, and they'll just be restless and tantrumy, or they could have all sorts of stomach issues. It's a really important remedy for all sorts of pains. You know, when you think sharp stabbing pains, think of these remedies. It's really funny. I'm like trying to think of like why this squash family has this sharp stabbing quality to it. I mean, I guess I just think of like when we take our knife and we go into our pumpkin and we're just like, you know, and we like crack it open. And maybe it's associated with that. And then, as I've kind of mentioned already, pumpkin, Curcubito pepo, or the pumpkin, is for tapeworm. You know, it's an optional remedy for kids who are contradictory, demand a lot of attention, have a lot of suppressed anger. Maybe they've been mistreated or abused. They don't feel respected or appreciated. They've given too much. I think it's when I think of pumpkin, it's also associated maybe through Disney only with Cinderella. And I think that came up with Schulten mentioned that is like, you've done so much cleaning and, you know, you haven't gotten your acknowledgement and it's just like not fair. It's kind of a Staphysagria kind of picture and maybe like optional to Staphysagria. You know, they got this anger inside. But it's the anger is this kind of tapeworm showing up as like a tapeworm. So there are many other cucumber family remedies. I mean, majority of the time I'm giving Bryonia and Colocynthis. You know, I've given Viola odorata to a kid who had bruises all over his face from hitting himself, from being in so much pain, but he was literally like violet colored. There's watermelon. So watermelon, as some of you might know, makes us pee and makes us get up in the middle of the night to go pee. So it has this affinity for the bladder and urination. It's not a remedy I've given, but it's supposed to be for like this kind of bottled up anger or this bloated, bottled up feeling. This, I had to just look this up right before class and I can show this to you. This is the squirting cucumber. And I think this could be a great remedy. Songkran lists this as like the acute version of this remedy. So it's like, it's this cucumber or this plant where you just touch it and it just explodes and it shoots its seeds out like a meter away. So the feeling is like still this feeling of money is hard. I need financial independence. I've got all this anger, and then I, you know, kind of explode. Yakir, one of them said that it would be good for neonatal jaundice caused by rejection of blood types. I just thought that was interesting. Like it's like there's like a rejection quality to it. Could you give your cat and dog who have tapeworms pumpkin? Possibly. I'll show you. I made a formula once that had a pumpkin in it that really helped. I'm just going to show you this cool plant just because I thought it was really fun. Okay. So this is it. This is the only video I'm going to show in today's class. But can you guys see it? Yes. Okay. So this one he's touching with a stick, and this is in slow. There, did you see it? Squirt out. So that's it's like bonk, squirt. So that's the quality, if you can imagine, of a person doing something like that. Oh, maybe they'll do another one here. I don't know what the purpose of this plant is. I don't know if anyone actually eats it. The loofah, the sponge that we use, is in this family of the cucumber gourds. Supposed to be good for dryness, as you could imagine, but also taking on sponging up everybody's financial problems. Asthma, breathing issues, sinus issues. Um, my daughter had a latrium. It got her out of her bedroom and interacting with her family again. She said she was hiding so she wouldn't hurt her sister because her impulse control wasn't there. Awesome. I should add that to the notes. That's a perfect example of like a trigger response, trigger response to anger and like, causing this kind of acute outburst in a way, maybe making it similar to belladonna and some of the other remedies we're talking about today. Somebody asked, is there really a Cinderella remedy? I would say, I don't know. I would love all of you guys to respond to that my sense of the Cinderella of being the kind of, abused stepsister who's orphaned and father isn't really available and needs to be rescued by a prince and is stuck, doing all the housework, but needing to be sweet and nice. What a wonderful archetype for children to look up to. And that was one of my favorite movies growing up. I still like sweep and wash the floor and think about Cinderella. I kind of think it's a resentment kind of a feeling. So I associate it with Staphysagria, but then she's always kind of happy. She never gets angry. So perhaps, I don't know, what do you guys think? Phosphorus? Toxicodendron pubescens said on Future for Cinderella. Okay, so that's in the Rustox family. Carcinosin. Carcinosin would be the cinder. Got very, very good. Keeping it all sweet, causticum maybe unfair. Staphysagria, yeah. Funny question. A lot of homeopathy uses comparisons to these fables because it's important. These fables, in a way, are medicine. Stories are medicine too. And so Mamortica is bitter melon. There isn't a lot of mentals on them, but as you can imagine, the remedy of bitter melon being good for diabetes and a bitter personality and all sorts of diarrhea and colic type stuff. So colosynthis, this is one of the cases. So this was a woman who was a lawyer while she was working. And she was bullied by her boss. She was made to work as much or more than her coworkers, but she was pregnant and she felt that was really unfair and it was making her cry. They're fighting. He was belittling her and it made her depressed. She wanted more respect, but he said you had to earn it. You don't get different treatment just because you're a woman. So he was really being harsh to her. There's no excuses. You can't go home early just because you're pregnant. I feel like I could have killed him with my bare hands, but I just sat there and took it. So she sat there and she took it and she just I think she had like an argument with him and then she got in her car, vomited all over her car and like passed out. So it was like just that level, that kind of intensity. She was really worried about her pregnancy and her daughter after that, who was born subsequently with fairly severe autism. She was bullied. It was really unfair. I kept hanging on to the job because we needed the money to pay the rent, to pay for our car. So I was in a place I didn't want to be in. Okay, so that feeling, like really she should have just quit right away if she was feeling uncomfortable and prioritized herself. Let's see. So then we move to the daughter and yeah. The daughter then is born. The story of pregnancy. Yes, let me put this up on screen. Okay. My weakness is to make my boss act that way towards me. I should be blamed as well. I wanted to be at work. I had the choice of leaving and making less money, but I still went there every day. The daughter is very unpredictable. We don't know what to expect. She'll have meltdowns, screaming, whining, violent and biting. Sometimes she'll be really good, dumps her body on the floor, trying to hurt people. She's got pain in her body. She's holding it in her stomach and putting a pillow there. So she's bent over all the time. I have at least 3 cases of this remedy where this is like the main remedy that I gave that completely, like literally pushed the child almost completely out of autism or special needs. So it can be really powerful when you get a good GI remedy. It's like she doesn't have a backbone. She puts a pillow and crouches over it. The triggers for her angriness is when you ask her to do something. So do this, and she'll be like, I don't want to, she doesn't take it well. If you call her name, she'll respond in an angry way. What? That kind of a thing. Anything that requires her to think, stresses her out, she'll yell back. This is Colosynthis. Here she is. This is actually a picture of her bent over like that. So we gave her Colosynthis, and it, really, for she would just be turned like happy, giggly, just completely like joyful for the first time in her life. And then we needed to clear yeast, and there was just lots of junk in her intestines. So it's like you open that up, and then it's just like parasites and yeast and working through that. So it's not ending, but you get the feeling of the feeling in the gut. Here's a mom case. I feel overwhelmed. We run a few businesses. I have a special needs child. I would like to function better. I get migraines from a muscle spasm at the base of my skull. Arnica helped quell the spasms, but then I went to an amusement park and my arms hurt really badly. I looked up a remedy. It was bryonia. After the first sip, my pain was gone. I believe it was like kind of like arthritis-like pain. After bryonia, I can drink alcohol again. A rage came up in me. I hadn't had it. It was really prolonged. I was irritated with my family, so angry that I was being asked to do something. I couldn't have a moment to myself. Instead of being upset with my kids, I just wanted to yell and I wanted to be left alone. That happened after bryonia. It almost seemed like a bryonia related aggravation. So, but that ended up being a really good remedy for her for a long time. And I believe her daughter who had asthma. So here's another child case of bryonia. In this child, her father acts kind of bryonia, but she does too, right? So they went to Hong Kong, and they were angry in Hong Kong. Her dad was angered at all the prices in Hong Kong and would just leave us behind. So they imagine this like family being tourists in Hong Kong and just like, that's what was happening. Just wanting to cross the street without us, pushing people out of the way, getting them to move, impatient, also bloated and crying, the bellies in pain. They ate a lot of junk food in Hong Kong. Stomach was hard and gassy, making them impatient and cranky, talking a lot about the food in Hong Kong. Okay, so this combination of this irritability, shouting, angry at prices and money and gut stuff is super bryonia. She has a hard time saying she's sorry. She can command other people, but she can tell other people to apologize, but can't do it herself. No emotion on the face. Okay, I should find you guys a good bryonia influenza case. I'll maybe look for one, but they're surely coming up with COVID right now. I haven't used Curcubitae pepo, the pumpkin, as a singular remedy, but I found a case here where I put it into a formula, and that's what I'll do sometimes when I'm like kind of just unsure. You guys know me as a homeopath. I'm a pretty free-flowing, no rules barred homeopath. So I just sometimes just put everything into a formula, and it can work. Like just if you're like, this is what I feel like we should do, just do it. Herbalists do it. Chinese acupuncturists do it. Homeopaths can do it too. It really helps to muscle test though. I mean, sometimes I'll just muscle test to put things into a formula. So this was a child who had really high parasite load, pooping in her clothes, a lot. She was very contradictory. She had a lot of styes in her eyes, and I would give Staphylos aureus. She was really angry, and Staphylos aureus didn't do anything. It just didn't touch it. She was social, but she had worms. One of the interesting things, so I put in the formula sulfur, Curcubita pepo, cuprum, and tucrium. Tucrium is the remedy of catnip, but it's also very good for tapeworm. This was her picture that she drew of her family, and I thought it was so freaky when I saw it, because actually her art, her teacher pulled the mother aside just to show her art, because it looks really, when I saw it, I was like, it looks like a parasite. And the way that she drew the dad with this thing coming off of his head, like, what is that? Kids have all sorts of drawing styles, so I don't like to kind of overly analyze kids' drawing and make too much out of it. But for me, this looked really weird, the way that the mom was too. And then she drew this as like this was a person. I don't know if you can see this, but that is an odd looking person. To me, that looks more like a parasite or a worm or a dragon or something like that. This was her art afterwards. This was like the next appointment, was this. And that was just an amazing, the mom was like, I've got to show you her art. And I love that. I love it when parents show art, it's just like colorful. It looks like she knew what she was doing. So a good thing, this is like freedom. And we worked, parasites are hard. Sometimes you just have to do things like, add in the herbs and make a formula and do things around the full moon. But this can be the result. Yeah. We can maybe make our own parasite mix, but yeah, I think making a parasite mix is totally doable. And there's a lot of good parasite remedies out there that aren't used much. I mean, I've taught you guys Sina, but there's Felix moss, which is the fern. There's Curcubita pepo. There's many others. Tucrium. Yeah, Chelone glabra, good for parasites. Gosh, I could probably just start, or most of the remedies for seizures, even the Solanaceae have some parasite. Chamomilla, Artemisia, cuprum, yeah, cuprum nigrum, yes. Okay, we've got an hour timing this class. I just threw this in there. This is not a big family. And in fact, it gets categorized within other families of plants, but the onion garlic family, because I wanted to throw the vampire in there. And in the Book of Life, when I list themes. Some of the families have the themes of evil, like literally like associated with it. This is one of them, although I've hardly ever used the remedies of garlic and onion. So I'm not speaking from a lot of experience here, but I'm putting this out there for you guys to experiment with. Anacardium family also has themes of the evil and darkness and the split and the devil. I'm not talking about that today either, but it's just too much. But I threw this in there. The onion and garlic is Alliaceae, and it's part of the lily family. Why is it that garlic? What does garlic actually do to the vampire? They're just afraid of it, or can it actually kill them? I think it's the steak. Anybody watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer? But garlic, you're supposed to wear like garlic around your neck, right? Like as a protection thing. To protect us from vampires. Um, all of the teenage vampire stuff where it's like, the cool kids who are the vampires who like, what is that TV series that was so popular? And turn all the other kids into vampires. Like, why is that popular right now? To me, it's this idea of blood infection. This blood infection happening when you're a teenager. Maybe it's there to kind of prepare us for it. I'm not sure. In Muslim lore, I just found this out. The devil left the Garden of Eden and wherever he stepped, garlic sprang up from one foot and onion sprang up from the other. So garlic and onion is associated with heat and evil in some countries. And in some countries, you shouldn't eat it. Parts of India and Islamic cultures, they don't let people eat it. I think it's because it has so much sulfur in it. Sulfur makes us hot and angry and sexual. It makes us like lust. Maybe not makes us, but it makes us more prone to falling in love. Let's just say that. Falling in love with a sexy man. And that's okay because we're releasing the shadow. It was really funny. I was watching this reality TV show and the sexiest, cutest guy was on it. And I was just commenting on it. I was like, I didn't care. I just let it fly with my husband. And he was so angry at me, but it was really funny to just be like, he is so hot. And Ryan's like, he's not. It was the Great Pottery Throwdown, and second season, the winner of the Great Pottery Throwdown is a male supermodel, just so you know. He's super hot. Anyways, that's this remedy family. I guess I'm getting into it. Totally. It's about hot. I'm getting hot just thinking about it. In India, garlic is identified from having sprung from the blood of a demon, the enemy of the gods who was killed by Vishnu, So anyways, associated with death, darkness, and evil. But we know that we can eat a ton of garlic and totally cure all sorts of things, whether it's hypertension or infection or, but then it creates this smell and it's like, you don't want to be around someone who's like eating a lot of garlic. So the themes associated with onion and garlic is sexuality, passion, fieriness, this kind of sulfury energy. We eat garlic because it can cleanse us out too. We can kind of put garlic on something and kill something off. So it has this kind of cleansing quality to it. This idea of purity versus impurity. Big on the digestive system, the immune system, the respiratory system. So the onion, Schulten, I'm putting Schulten and Mikhail Yakir's quotes on these, partly because I don't have a ton of experience. I've given allium cepa for allergies. Allium cepa is the kind of allergies where you're just watering, your nose is just draining, and it creates like an acrid feeling, like the burning feeling around your nose or your eyes. Your tears are burning, and you think of that as an onion. An onion is a very watery vegetable, right? And so it pulls up all of this water and it creates this acrid substance. So Yakir, Schulten is like, this is for people who are proving that they can be monogamous, that they don't have to like commit adultery, right? There's this desire for sexuality, but I'm like staying cool. Interesting. Yakir writes, mild stress in this person causes them to release water or cry, but when they're deeply hurt, they have a lot of watery emotions. So they can either release a lot of water or become detached. The idea of blisters from when you walk, is supposed to be helped by the onion, which I've never tried before, but I get blisters from shoes, high heel shoes when I'm trying to be sexy. Then I get the blisters. It's like, bad girl. So, oh man, there's some demonic shoes out there. Seriously. I'm sure all of you have worn demonic shoes. Allium sativa is garlic. Torture chamber shoes. Oh man. So Scholten writes, these are people who are happily married, but someone did commit adultery, so that makes it stage 13. So the marriage is no longer pure, and there's this desire for this nostalgia for purity. Yeah, Kira writes, it's good for like basically a very sulfury person who is gluttonous, likes too much, wants to eat too much, can't say no, excessive in their desires, very kapha, very like earthy, very wanting sex and food and just excessive, creating too much sensitivity, too much overload of the digestive system. And then eventually it causes the digestive system to break down, creating a kind of hypochondriacness. And they want to be around people. But she also writes, they tend to withhold feelings and they get locked up in their chest. So it's this, maybe there's a fear of overly kind of giving or connecting. So there's maybe this chesty phlegm or issues in the respiratory system. It reminds me of somebody with some sort of like congestive heart failure who's eaten too much. I have not given that remedy for that. So yes. Yeah. Okay, on to the nightshades. So this is such an important plant family, and I could have given a whole class to it, but my guess is a lot of you guys know this plant family. Wow. How many of you have knowingly used a remedy in the nightshade family? And which one is it? I mean, I would guess that, probably 30 to 50% of all my cases I've given a nightshade remedy to or something. There's just like a huge, yes. I've always wondered what chemical that makes them burn. Maybe sulfur. Yeah, what chemical makes onions burn? I think it's it's the sulfury quality in them. I think there's something called allicin, which is actually the chemical constituent within those plants that gives it that quality too. Like if you want to take garlic that has supplement, has to have a lot of that allicin component to it. So I think Nightshade Free Survival Guide, it's like we love it, and yet it's also like, a lot of diets, the anti-inflammatory diet is, cut out the nightshades. It's a common thing if you have joint pain or any inflammation to cut these out, right? At the same time, what do these plants bring in is the heat. They bring in a kind of a warmth to them. They bring in that feeling of fire. There's fire, and sometimes we need that, and people crave that fire. I'm curious for those of you who are allergic to nightshades, what happens in your body if you eat them, and specifically which one? And I would say, well, then let's dose some. I think it's highly in homeopathy, we should look at the remedy, the plants people have allergies to, and consider them as as possible remedies, because it's important. Raw tomatoes make my throat and ears itch. Yeah. You ever taste tomatoes and feel like they taste like fish? I thought at some point in my life, I thought that they had this fishy taste, and I thought it was because of the GMO that they like spliced. They splice different animals into these like GMO vegetables to make them like more hardy. It's weird. And I swear to God, I can taste fish in a tomato. Tachycardia, hives, high blood pressure, stomach pain. Like there's a rock in my stomach, makes me bend over in pain. Interesting. Swollen fingers from potatoes. Interesting. Yeah, we talked. Modified with spiders. Can you explain that? Like spider remedies helped. Joint pains and inflammation. I cannot eat nightshades for years. I once healed my gut with polybowels and started taking dulcimara, and now I can add them back. I have to be careful with peppers because they still cause flares, causing my joints to swell and hurt. Migraines. Yeah, tomatoes. Tomatoes are GMO with spiders. Oh my God. Weird. Ah. Sore tendons around the hips after nightshades, right? To keep them fresh. Bizarre. Yeah, and who knows whatever is spliced into all of these other things, maybe that's partly why we're reacting to some of them, but yeah. Okay. So remedies to unlock the unconscious, the reptile brain, the cursing, lewd, violent person inside of you. Don't use sailor mouth. This is, I would say, we all have violence at our root. This is our culture, our humanity is based in violence, and so we pretend that we live in a very organized society, and that's the control. And so many of the plant remedies that I could talk about is about this evasion of the subconscious. Like we take addictive opiates to avoid the subconscious shadow. Tea, we drink tea because tea civilizes us. Tea, the remedy Thea, somebody in our class is named Thea, is all about civilizing our uncivilized qualities. Our desire to there's been war over tea, right? And the Tea Party. So a lot of plants, it's about being civilized versus being uncivilized. And where is that juncture? The Solanaceae family, and this was really, I really got it for the first time when putting the notes together for this class. It's written by Schulten here, and I really loved it. The Solanals are the last episode before one really becomes human and not a victim anymore. And what he's really saying is it's like when we're still fighting the wild animal inside, the wild animal that we're victim to, the wild animal that is just basically prey to all of the circumstantial things happening to it, versus I make my life, like I'm in charge of my life. I'm a human engaging in the world. It's called Solanals. They don't know why actually, but it is associated with the sun, soul, and it's bringing that light, bringing the light in. These plants need a lot of sun. They soak it up, right? To get these tomatoes really red, they need they're just like sun sponges. And they're bringing us that sunshine. They're bringing us that heat. So very psychoactive plant family. Atropine, hyoscyamine, nicotine. Did you know that tobacco is in the Solanaceae family, and it's nicotine is a highly epileptic, brain inflammatory substance. My friend who's really into shamanism once took a tobacco pipe. They do this in South America, and she rolled this. It's called hape, but it's tobacco, and she blew it up my nose, and it went right into like my third eye area, and it was just like goosh, like this huge explosion feeling, and my third eye was so open, but it also felt like my head was exploding at the same time. So in a subtle way, cigarettes it opens us, right? It puts us in touch with some level of awareness, and tobacco is very associated with powerful medicine and shamanic medicine, but it's psychoactive. Um, for any of you who smoke, why did you smoke? I mean, it's interesting. There's a quality to smoke that is really draws people in. You know, it we all know that it kills us, and yet we crave it. Okay. So the sensation of this plant family is life or death, right? Or fight or flight, escape, rage, panic. Like the bear is going to get me. I'm going to either freeze or run and or attack, right? So it's in that moment of like, I'm in the forest, there's wild animals, it's dark, I'm freaking out, right? So the response is violence, seizures, explosive, fight or flight, killed. That sounds intense. Now, on a subtle level, it's what you guys can have. It's just inflammation. Inflammation is just the body's response to threat. To its inflammation is, what is it? Rubor, which is redness, pain, swelling, you know, and we're afraid of inflammation because it's painful and it's associated with basically joint destruction or destruction of the body. But it's also how the body heals itself, right? And it's how the body gets going. It's how the body gets inflamed. Sometimes we need heat. Sometimes we're a little too like cold and flat and phlegmatic, and we need a little heat. Tobacco makes me sick. Tobacco during pregnancy was very helpful. Tobacco was helpful for me during pregnancy and nausea as well. Actually, Ipecac was the most helpful remedy when I was nauseous. I would say the word Ipecac, and the nausea would leave me. I can't even smell it without being sick to my stomach. Never smoked once because of that. I crave tobacco like you wouldn't believe, but I never smoke. Yeah, I crave tobacco too. Like, I think that, you know, it's culturally embedded on a lot of levels. And when people smoke, like I like to like be around smokers. So, you know, the opposite of this intensity is this faintness, this stupefied, unconscious feeling, you know, that can happen. But you're not necessarily going to see that actively in a person. So these are the remedies that we're going to talk about, and I'll talk about them in detail, but here are the main differences. So stramonium is the most fearful, most terrified, fear of the dark. You know, these really scary movies where kids have their eyes wide open, like horror movies. That's the feeling. Like I'm frozen because I'm so scared. You can be in a stramonium state from being born, from coming from the womb and being in this place of dark and coming into the light. Paul Herskue wrote an entire book on stramonium, and we'll get more into it. But this is, if stramonium feels like a big deal to you, I highly recommend it. Belladonna meaning a beautiful woman, because they used to put the belladonna in their eyes to make them dilate. Women used to put it in their eyes to make them dilate, to make them beautiful. Is the most needing of routine and order, and it's like help card. Like I need this structure in my life because the structure prevents things like the unpredictable from happening, and it's the unpredictability that I'm afraid of. I don't want the unpredictable loud noise because it's going to freak me out. I don't want the unpredictable thing jumping at me, dog, you know? So liking predictability. Hyoscyamus is the most sexual and anal, but it's like a cat. You know, is the way I think of Hyos. And it's a really wonderful animal remedy, an animal that is really needy and clingy and what's the word? And humans can be like this too, possessive. So it's like you're mine and you're not anybody else's. And it's like you've got your lover and you're afraid that they're going to cheat on you, so you control them. You know, they're on a short leash. So hyoscyamus is jealous, and probably the most jealous one. Capsicum, I think of when there's issues in the back of the head, and the inflammation is maybe behind the ears, and the mastoid process is behind the ears. Atropinum is a remedy from the actual alkaloid from these plants, so atropine. Salgram puts it in the tubercular miasm, and I've only used it in a very tubercular case that also did well with stramonium and belladonna, and it was just like so many of those remedies worked, and then we like worked through them, and then finally I just went to atropine, right, and it helped. Mandragora, we'll get to. Mandragora is the mandrake root, really associated with witches. And there's this insanity component related, fear of the devil, but fear that I am the devil. Tabacum is the nausea, associated with nausea. And dulcimara is the most subtle, the most like kind of like inflammation from damp cold, and my joints are inflamed. And like I think it was Christine said, it really helped her with her joint pain. So speaking of Halloween, when I think of stramonium, I think of zombie, I think of poltergeist, I think of that TV show that Aaron likes, Stranger Things. Stranger Things is like these kids, they basically like there's an underworld, and there's like the kid in it, he's so scared and his eyes are just big and like saucers, and he's innocent, and then the darkness starts to take over him, and that is stramonium. But a lot of people can use stramonium. It's not like stramonium you can give to the severe autistic kid who's any kind of sensory thing is triggering them to have either a rage or an epileptic attack, and everything is just so scary because the world is so overwhelming. One of the most important remedies for autism, extreme autism, where there's that sensory overload component. To a kid who has like really bad nightmares and is afraid of the dark and their nightmares are regular, I will give stramonium. So it's that range you can do stramonium with. It's an incredibly important and powerful remedy. Belladonna is the same way. You could have this kid who's this Hulk-like kid, or somebody with like migraines that are just, their head wants to like explode. It's not the only explosive remedy, but you know, belladonna is this kind of Hulk-like energy, but it can also just be somebody who is just really powerful in their body and they get too worked up. It's like there's just essentially a lot of fire going on in their system, and they're worked up, and they get oversensitive, and their brain wants to just like explode. They're too expanded in a sense. It's like they're just like a fire. Belladonna was amazing for my daughter's rages. Yeah. Oh, okay. Massimo wrote a book on the Solanaceae. He's Italian. It's good. Ability to keep the shadow side separate. They know it's there, but they like to keep it hidden. Stramonium is so close to that shadow that they are living that nightmare a lot of the time. I agree with that. And I also have seen stramonium help with just, the thing with materia medica is sometimes it shows the extreme. And I want you to know the subtlety too. I want you to know that a lot of you guys listening here, I can show you the extreme cases, but these will be good remedies just for average people too, because it's working on this rejected shadow part of ourselves that comes up when we get this massive headache or inflammation. So I associate stramonium with a zombie, partly because they actually made zombies by feeding people, like basically burying people alive by shoving stramonium flowers in their mouth, and it would make them feel half dead, half alive. Like it was part of the actual creation of the zombie. in the West Indies. So they like zombies in the West Indies. I see somebody frowning. It really helps me. The West Indies with voodoo, the zombie isn't just this made up thing. It comes out of voodoo, and they had slaves working on plantations, and to make them really docile and to be your slave, they basically would kidnap people and turn them into zombies. To turn somebody into a zombie, you kidnap this person and they'd put bufo, they'd give them toad poison and stramonium, and it would make them appear dead. Like, I think it would make their vitals just stop. And then they would bury them, and everyone would think that they're dead, they're gone. And then what they would do is dig them back up out of the ground and revive them, or they're like alive, but everyone thinks they're dead. And then they become these like willing slaves who are like half dead, half alive. So this is like a real thing. This is truly is associated with the zombie lore. We also learned in college to give stramonium after a C-section. The baby pulled from the watery room into a bright light. Totally. Have I ever seen anyone prove or aggravate on stramonium to create a zombie state? No, I haven't. We're using stramonium now, and interestingly, my son is far less violent than ever before, so I didn't think about it. It's important to think about the non-extremes. Absolutely. Yeah, it's like, if you were like so freaking afraid of Night of the Living Dead or any of those scary movies, or you still are, that piece of you is still in there, or you're really engaged in it, or it causes some sort of like something within you. I think all of us have these triggers. Belladonna the Hulk, Hyoscyamus, I think of the Joker, or the Joker, because it's that crazy needing attention kind of comedian that's also twisted, yeah, a lot of comedians up on stage like Borat or whatever, it has this Hyos kind of energy. We used stramonium for my younger daughter. Her main pan symptom was nightmares and high-pitched screaming for hours when triggered. Night terrors, where a kid just gets up out of like in the middle of the night and is just screaming. That's so freaky. This is a remedy for night terrors, right? It's a kind of like a brain release, a real release of the subconscious and the fears. Oh gosh. Mandragora, we'll get to the crazy witch, and tobacco, I wrote the shaman. Nobody dresses as a shaman for Halloween, but it is associated with shamanism. So, yeah, I would say some of them, the belladonna, atropinum, hyos, I wrote this a while ago. They have strong effects on the brain and central nervous system, and so it's like when we're talking about the shadow, we're talking about the central nervous system. We're talking about our survival state. When we're talking about survival, what's the most important part of our survival? It's our central nervous system, our heart. But this is really, to me, it's this lower brain. It's the brain stem. It's when that lower brain is inflamed. That's where these remedies really treat. Yeah, it is very stressful and disturbing when a child has nightmares. When a child has nightmares, the content of that nightmare is potent, and really, a mom just yesterday told me her child started letterboarding for the first time and told her about her nightmares. And her nightmare, she's autistic, is that she was stuck behind glass and nobody could hear her. And I was like, that's an autism dream, but it was so important for her to get that out. Farouk Master writes this, although I'm not sure if I agree with it. I'm putting this in there just because it's interesting that they're so similar that they can antidote each other. I've not found this, partly because I muscle test, and I feel like muscle testing is a way for us to avoid aggravation and antidoting. But if you aren't doing that, then you might end up antidoting because they're so similar, or maybe one thing helps, and they kind of work together. what I found is that I have a lot of cases of special needs kids that will need many remedies in this family. So it's like stramonium and belladonna and atropinum and hyos, and I'll just like kind of go through a bunch of them, and it'll really bring it down. Schulten, we talked about what he said. Yeah, Kira, I like this. There's a real childishness truly associated here. This unready to face the world. These are such important remedies for children because children are so much more free. The world is a scarier place for them. They're more defenseless, right? They're more tapped into that animal instinct. They're closer to their shadows in a way. And they have these uncontrollable manifestations of their shadow through hysteria, through rage. All of our kids do that, right? Escape, fight or flight, dilated pupils. So they all have immense fears, fear of death. Anything that can bring on a fear can kind of bring these remedies out. Night terrors, aggression, ritualism, needing to do things a certain way, being depressed and on guard out of that fear. I remember a girl coming to me and just hunched, and she would talk to me and her eyes were big, and this was the feeling. And she was like, I don't know. I'm just so scared. That this is just feeling terror just under the surface. And that was stramonium. So hyperactivity, not knowing what to do with all the energy that they're tapped into. The explosion, the fire within the nervous system comes out as seizures, migraines, these adrenaline-like reactions, abnormal EEGs. The nervous system's oversensitive, superhuman strength, tics, twitches, jerking, encephalitis, worse heat, hallucinations, deep-seated infection. Right? So deep-seated infection, a vaccination, they can kind of bring this on. The desire for lemonade or sour is to kind of, it's an electrolyte to cool and to bring in to me, the antioxidants that the lemon, the vitamin C to quench. It's almost like you're drying your system out with that heat. Stramonium is such a cool plant. Like, look at it. It looks like vicious right there and beautiful at the same time. Jimson weed, loco weed. It's got some cool names. Mad apple, hell's bells, the devil's trumpet, the mad hatter, the devil's snare. I mean, have you ever heard of these names? Crazy tea and zombie cucumber. So those are the names of this plant. It's just so amazing. I've also heard that Buddhist temples put this plant. It's a very holy plant. So it's a gateway plant, right? It's this gateway into the subconscious, into the unknown. Paul in his book writes, driven by confusion, fears, vulnerability, stramonium's engaged in an ongoing and violent battle between the unconscious and the conscious, between the darkness and the light, succumbing to the death realm and yearning to exist in life. So there's that fear of death is ultimately a really powerful piece of stramonium, and fear of like scary things, just scary things as representative of death, right? So a horror movie is representing death. Yeah, deeply frightened animals, all range of kids. We talked about this, big eyes brimming with fear. Clinginess out of fear of abandonment, fear of death. Other remedies can have that too. Arsenicum has fear of death really big. Scared of monsters, evil, the dark, water, closed spaces, causing clinging, causing ADHD, poor impulse control. And then like the intensity leads to almost zombie shutdown, a tiredness, a numbness. I was a stramonium child too. That's why I'm afraid of that. Yeah, right after I gave birth to Eva, I was so shocked, but I muscle tested to take stramonium, like aconite and stramonium. It's like high potency. So I do feel that stramonium states are common. In some ways, it feels like a lot of us have experienced this at some point. Violence in reaction to fear. So in the book Stramonium, I just wanted to mention that Paul has this like really interesting cycle that he calls the map of hierarchy. And really what this represents is he puts basically mineral remedies as phase 1, as that's what's healthy. And then you get infection. Phase 2 are the nosodes. You get this infection. And it creates the infection either creates a dullness and a shutdown state, or it creates an inflammatory state. And the real dullness pushes people into like either arnica or bufo or cannabis indica, these kind of like dulled, like I'm separating from this, disconnected opium escape. Or it pushes you into kind of violence. So remedies that have to do with violence, like tarantula or lachesis or veratrum. So I'll show this. There is this in pandas cases and autism cases. There's a general progression of the case where you want to move. You're taking the CNS and the inflammation in the CNS, and you're antidoting the inflammation in the CNS with these remedies, and you're bringing the heat down. And then what happens is all the control, all of the attempt to suppress that heat next comes up. You need carcinosin or ignatia, or maybe a remedies to clear drugs that were suppressive, right? And then you kind of back out of that, and then you treat the underlying miasms. So I just wanted to mention that. Stramonium is a remedy similar to aconite. It can have that kind of acute. Aconite is also an adrenaline remedy. And so when somebody has a severe fright, I often think of aconite as the heart is pounding. That's a big feeling for aconite. Stramonium, it's like these remedies, think of the dilated pupils for these remedies. Yeah, try stramonium instead if you prove aconite. Yeah, I had a case of a woman who, I'll get into cases, but a woman who had been raped violently, and she was just shaking, and stramonium just completely, it had happened years before, but when she took stramonium in the office, she just completely, everything released. It was a really powerful moment. Belladonna. So this is, a lot of what I teach comes from Paul Herskew's perspective on these remedies, and I feel that he understood them really well, and his cycles of them are really awesome. So I just want to put that out there. I believe his teachings were great, and so I'm kind of giving you some of that. Belladonna is really common. You can use it for massive migraines, but you can also use it in low potencies for tics and twitches. I definitely have kids who come from these families, and they're these perfect families, and these kids are perfect, and they have tics or twitches, and the kid really needs carcinosin because they're controlling everything, but like underneath that is inflammation because they got over vaccinated. And I'll do belladonna in a low potency kind of regularly, or in an LM potency, and it helps release the inflammation. Belladonna is associated with calc carb. Like it's almost like a calc carb type of kid can go into a belladonna state. I'll share a case. High spiking fevers. The belladonna fever is supposed to be like hot head, cold hands, and maybe delirious as well during the fever. People who can constitutionally, they're like people who are just loud, gregarious, full on people, a lot of heat, a lot of energy. They enter the room, they take it over, they want to move mountains. They can need belladonna. They're working through and using this energy, wanting to work, do stuff, but fearing that lack of predictability. Still these unusual fears underneath it all, and inflammations. Okay, even menstrual cramps can be helped by belladonna. Yeah. So when you think of like, when you're taking cases, special needs cases, and you're like, you take them somewhere new, what happens? Or if they get exposed to, loud noises, lights, sounds, what happens? If it's like this unconscious, like just knee-jerk reaction, it's kind of these remedies. Whereas if it's this more like, I've thought this out, like premeditated, manipulative, violent reaction, that's a little bit more like spider or snake, right? Like it's not coming from this just purely reactive place. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So, Hyoscyamus, also funny name, stinking nightshade, black henbane, the crazy plant. A really, really important plant. It's unfortunate because it gets so associated in the materia medica with obscene behavior. So showing my genitals, Tourette's, like, or that kind of Tourette's where you're just like F word, that people are just basically saying all of these obscene things, nymphomania, schizophrenia. It's, and surely this remedy is there for that, but it can be subtle. I've given this remedy in cases where it was just like a subtle anacardium person who is battling their unconscious urges, and really liked to be naked at parties. Like he'd get drunk and naked at the party, right? Like, oh, now I'm drunk, I'm going to take off all my clothes, or I'd given this remedy to a girl who had a lot of tics and twitches, and she needed a spider remedy first. And her tics and twitches would get worse when she was afraid that her friends were talking about her behind her back. So it's like that fear of like friends, rejecting, needing people. This is a very emotionally needy, and for the most part, stramonium, hyos, these remedies, they want the company of others to help them feel safe. Right. So Hyoscyamus, yeah, abandonment. I don't know. You ever seen a cat that, has been alone for a while that kind of freaks out? It's like puts them into like a hyos state. Paul talked about like, it was just really memorable when he taught it, but like a woman who's giving birth, but she's really like overly growling and grunting and going. It's like in her birth, she's just like, and it's like totally animal, and there's like blood and shit everywhere. He's like, that's hyos. So I've never seen a birth like that. I've never gotten to give that remedy at that time, but I'm assuming it would be very interesting. So yeah, it's, to me, it's a very high school kind of energy in a relationship, this kind of high school drama where it's like, he's my boyfriend, and like, don't flirt, and like you're really possessive over somebody. What I really found was super interesting was herbally, Hyoscyamus was given for toothaches. So they used to put henbane seeds and burn it and like put them on the toothache, and it would burn out the worms of a cavity. And I think it's so interesting, partly because I had my cavity come up recently, and then Hyoscyamus came up after I was trying to clear it. And I just thought that was so interesting that, at its core, is there a real wormy quality to this? Like, I need you, I'm jealous, like you're mine, I'm clinging to you, to this inflammation happening here. Jealousy and suspicion is big in Hyos. Okay. All right. Paul Herskey's cycle is perceived feeling of emptiness, wanting somebody to get them over their sense of emptiness, jealous and suspicious if somebody takes my special someone away. They'll look at their siblings. So when a sibling is born and the elder sibling is jealous and does mean things and like even violent things to the younger sibling, that can be hyoscyamus. Hatred towards the person who took my mommy away. Mania, excitement, chorea, dancing, loss of inhibition, shamelessness, weakness and broken down. Yeah, poor focus. Oh, common for OCD and Tourette's, brain trauma, dementia, great cat remedy, eyes rolling back and forth in the head. Yeah, involuntary bowels and urination. It has an affinity for the bowels, the colon. Easy spasms. Is this a remedy that would help with sexual identity, gender fluidity? I don't know. I had a case not too long ago. It was so interesting of gender identity confusion, and it was a teenage boy who was used to need anacardium and lachesis and didn't need it anymore, but had like low self-esteem on some level. And he started falling in love with other boys and taking pictures of boys and looking at porn, and the mom became aware of it. And actually, it all went away after I gave Platina. So I gave him Platina, and then after that, he needed kind of like indium. And indium is a remedy that's in the Argentum series for like mold. So I have no idea. I mean, what to say about that. For sure, sexual identity and gender fluidity is something that we can alter with homeopathy. And I've worked with other cases and other homeopaths whose, children were acting one way, and it shifted and they moved through that, with remedies. For example, gossypium, cotton, is a soft remedy. And I know someone who gave that to her son who was acting very feminine and had these qualities that made him seem gay, and she thought he was gay, and then it went away. Okay, so, gosh, I'm just wondering if this is enough on these 3 remedies because they are huge. Do you guys feel good about belladonna, hyos, and stramonium? Yeah? Okay. There's so many remedies to consider as options to them. There's other explosive glonium, I had used in a remedy in a case recently where there's a lot of explosive energy. Sulfur, metarhinum, lachesis are known for heat. The quality is really an internal heat, and the internal heat is deep enough that it causes this to react. So in the sensation, you're looking to see if this internal heat is coming up through that feeling. Is this feeling hot? Are they really feeling hot inside? Do they have to strip down? Are they sweating? Do you feel that inflammation at a deep level and coming out and being a problem? Okay, so tobacco is associated hugely with shamans because they smoked it to send their prayers to heaven. They smoked tobacco to surround themselves with a cloak of protection from the entities. So it was seen as a very powerful psychoactive plant. Homeopathically, it's known for this like sinking feeling while nauseous. vomiting, icy cold sweat. The feeling, have you, any of you guys been on a boat that's rocking a lot and you completely lose like your center? That's the feeling of tobacco. It's that kind of nausea. It's like you go into fight or flight because your body really does not know what's up and what's down. Yakir writes, mentally, people who need this tobacco, they start out with a lot of courage and action, and they want to go into the world, but then they become lazy and averse to work, and anxiety takes over. Anxiety in their chest, heart palpitations, anxiety related to death, death approaching, aggravation on opening the eyes, aggravation from light, issues with light is part of this whole family of light and dark. The cycle of tobacco being vomiting, feeling better from vomiting, and then feeling alone and wanting somebody there, worse from motion, that green in the face look. Comes on with the flu. It could be a detox remedy for someone who has a tobacco addiction. Okay. Capsicum, chili, this isn't really chili. These are red peppers. But when I look up capsicum, this is what comes up. So, you know, technically, I'm not quite sure homeopathic capsicum, which type of chili it's taken from. Capsicum is a really interesting, subtle representation of this plant family where it could be somebody who's kind of soft, gregarious, open, loving, kind of like sulfury, and then they have an explosive irritability. It's kind of like Cena, you know, where there's almost this like kind of, and actually capsicum is a remedy for parasites, right? Like you can take chili and it'll kill the parasites. So, you know, there was a time when I was really into like the parasite cleanses and people were like downing chilies, right? To kind of clear out the parasites. So same here, you know, the parasites are causing some sort of inflammation. In cases that I've seen of this, I've seen cases that are kind of like a gnat sulf or like this kind of natrum, kind of quiet, or calc carby, kind of flabby, and likes to eat a lot and loves chili, loves to eat it. So burning pains, there's a keynote associated with capsicum where it's homesick. And then there's also, I found the world is a threatening place. The world is a threatening experience, and it causes an anger, a violent reaction, an anger that could be violent. The one case that I had that was very strong for this remedy, it was someone from Israel who grew up really with a lot of violence all around him, and he loved chili. He was homesick all the time. He was just fits this picture completely. And then mandragora. So I'm really excited to teach this remedy. This is not a remedy that I've given a lot of, but it's such an interesting plant. And it's associated with Wicca and magic, and it grows its form. It looks like a human shape. And it is in Harry Potter. I believe it's in some Japanese anime because I found that pictures of it when looking for this picture. It's in various movies. So it was a key ingredient that made witches fly. It was used for all sorts of things. It was mentioned in the Bible. So in Genesis, there was Sarah couldn't conceive a child and she got mandrake roots and somehow it helped her conceive a child, right? Supposedly, the superstition is that if you pull up the root out of the earth yourself, you're condemned to hell. And if you pulled it out, the mandrake root would scream and cry, and it would kill anybody who would hear it scream and cry. So in the past, they would tie animals up and make animals pull them out. So there's all sorts of crazy things. One, they were associated with witches, and then witches were bad, and then the plant was bad. So it's this incredibly powerful plant steeped with just so much history, and it's just amazing. Yeah, the Arabs said that it was associated with the eggs of the jinn, the evil spirits. Yeah, used for medicinal and magical purposes. It's written as a remedy. It's for dark fears, demons, monsters, many fears. So it's like a darker version of a lot of the remedies we talked about today. Would like to kiss, caress people, but this ends badly in intense jealousy. So if you were to combine all of these remedies and intensify them, it's like it's mandrake root. This is what I hear when I read this. But I will show you one case, or there's like a couple cases this is tested for, but depressive tendency and violent outbursts, a dual attitude toward dogs. They want to save them, but there's intense fear towards them. Relationships in life are based on feelings of rejection. So locomotor ataxia, multiple sclerosis, like deep neurological disorders. It's not associated with being this kind of intense fight or flight reactiveness in the way that belladonna, hyoscyamus, and stramonium and atropine are. It's more like I'm in the darkness. I am the darkness. Like I'm operating in that place. I'm an outcast. Like I'm beyond being saved through a fight or flight reaction. I'm an outcast. I'm like a witch. I'm like a person walking around in a destroyed city after a war. That's what Scholten writes. Fearing of evil, fearing the devil, fearing insanity. Maybe somebody who's in an insane asylum. It's like they've already been put away. They could need this remedy. Dulcimara is like homelessness, possibly. I mean, a homeless person put away maybe for raging insanity. Yeah, possibly. I mean, at one point I looked into wanting to just grow this plant because it's just so fascinating, and there's so much you can read about it because it's so associated with Wicca and witches. Let me just skip ahead to the case I have of it just because it's so cool. So this was a woman who had, came to me for Lyme disease and stuck in her house and reactive to everything. Everything set her off. I couldn't give her a remedy. She had to just smell them, highly sensitive, severe fears of cats. She couldn't go places because of her fears, extreme OCD, her intense fear of going crazy. She had a fear of that she was going to go insane and be locked away and be schizophrenic, right? In a way, she was partially there. Being vegan was so important. She was so afraid that if she ate an animal food, it would just completely inflame her. Possibly it would. Mandrake is the name in English. Mandrake means dragon. Drake means dragon. So it's like fighting the dragon, the inner dragon. So she had a lot of, when I did the sensation, it was heat. I just feel heat in the middle, rising up, radiating onto my face. So sweaty. Eventually I get chilled because of the heat. Behind my heart, I can't feel a deep breath. The heat comes out explosively. Heat coming out explosively. Think of this family. My emotions go up and down. Tears burn my skin and eyes. I grieve my lost life in general. I'm lonely. There haven't been people to help me. I'm withdrawn from everybody. I don't have people in my life. I long for connection. Really sad case, right? I feel embarrassed. I have failed at life and I don't want people to know. Greatest fear is contamination. The OCD was really strong. When we went into deeper, she really saw an entity. Like we got to the point where she saw the entity of the fear. The entity was a dark, shaggy man with angry expression, and he wanted to kill her. It was like kill, hatred, evil. And there was this battle of wills between her and this entity. So I gave her mandragora for the fear of insanity and the heat and, you know, the outcast energy going on. And I just want you guys to look at the picture of her eyes. So this is the picture. I'm not giving you her full picture, but she sent me this picture, and do you see the red ring in her eye? It, you know, and that could be just like a light thing, but that to me was weird. You know, one, she had a flat expression. She had like literally redness coming out of her eyes. And after the remedy, she was smiling, or, you know, you can't really tell here, but she was, what she really felt was free. She said, I feel free, no worries, I have choice now. So it was just amazing and powerful. Did she completely go to being this person? Did she didn't, you know, where she could leave her parents' house? No, but she had a little more freedom. Was I able to continue the case fully to the nth point of healing? No. But this remedy helped her. And I just think it's amazing. So I'm looking that we have like 4 minutes left. I'm going to go a little bit over time. But what I'd like to do, let's see, Dulcimara we touched on. This is like the worst damp cold. So all nightshades are worst damp cold. Just think of it like tomatoes are worse when winter comes, right? The tomato needs the sunshine. But this one is just like the joint pain worst damp cold to consider for chronic joint pains. The personality of Dulcimara is a lot like Rustox as well. So similar to Rustox, discontented, restless, and a bit bossy. So the cold is their enemy. The cold is the threat to them. Yakir writes that the world is filled with little hostile viruses and cold weather, and it's all wanting to jump at you and make you sick, right? It's interesting because it sounds like how people could be with COVID. But it's not a remedy I've given a ton, but I think I probably could be giving it more. And I wrote other Solanaceae plants here. I have atropine, some details on them. Datura arborea, cork tree, Manaka or Franciscia. This remedy, Hoitzia, it's very similar to belladonna. So I'm putting them in here. These are not necessarily like your first choices, but if you're like, wow, this plant family really resonates, you can maybe muscle test these. One plant family I didn't know much about is the tomato. And the tomato, I've never given it before, but it's written to be red and congested like belladonna, but also really sensuous and flirtatious, juicy, right? So it's got this like juicy, sensual, you know, that quality of like a juicy woman. But then a really strong keynote is powerful springtime allergies, just like kukush, you know, allergies where you're just like blown out of proportion. Menianthes is also kind of similar to Hyos / Mandragora. Aggressive headaches, a feeling that evil is about to happen. This remedy, Black Nightshade, manic, overexcited. It sounds a lot like belladonna. Potato is kind of the opposite. It's the dull part of this plant family. It's the like, I want to sit on the couch, general paralysis happening. You know, what happens? We sit on the couch and we eat potato chips, you know, and it's the kind of the escape, right? Remedy of the opposite of some of these. So really representing the kind of yeastier, damp side of this plant family. And there is a plant remedy from the rotten potato, which has this kind of decay in the gut and putrefaction in the gut. Children with sleep problems, duality between fear and rage, cold and heat. I've not given this remedy much, but it's a very interesting one. I think of the Irish potato famine when I think of this remedy. And ashwagandha is in this plant family as well. So here they are. And if I feel someone has an entity attached, do I look at the energy of the entity or the energy of the person's response? Is it just an intuitive thing for you, or is there a rule of thumb you tend to follow? That's a bucket load of a question. Giving the right remedy can clear an entity, right? What is an entity? It's just an energy. But it's an energy that's given sometimes so much, like so little healing and so little attention that it's created its own identity. And maybe the entity is a ghost. Maybe it's like the identity of somebody who's died and their light body went to heaven and their heavier part of their body just coalesced and stayed as this entity, right? And then it attached onto you. So an entity can maybe come on from something, but often entities are self-created or self-attracted. We pull them in, maybe out of a need of loneliness. I have to say a really powerful case that I did a lot of stramonium with was a child who had a ton of entities. And we ended up working with an exorcist or multiple exorcist people for her. And this can happen. The movie The Exorcist, this is Halloween, so we get to talk about this, but we could talk about this anytime. The movie The Exorcist is real. It's based on a real case that happened in Georgetown, of a little girl that was demon possessed. So demon possession is an energy coming in, much like an infection, but the energy has a whole identity associated to it. We can say Bartonella is this, cat scratch disease is this, right? But on some level, well, then what do? You look at it, you shed light on it. Did it come from the outside? Is it part of that person? I ended up working with a guy, Tim, in the UK, who is an entity removal specialist. And he's like, don't do this work. He's like, it's not fun. And I'm like, okay, I won't. But it's kind of like with pandas, and we're healing these infections in kids. What can sometimes happen is we heal everything physical. And then what happens is it's almost like that spiritual piece that wasn't addressed, where it's like, God hates me, or there's this evil thing. It's still there because we didn't address it with homeopathy or natural medicine. And bringing in somebody who's a priest or a shaman or an exorcist is really great. I could be that person, but I don't choose to be. I choose to be. For me, homeopathy is that in between. You can go there. There are times where I've seen these energies in people and I'm like, leave now, like you're not allowed in there. But really it has to come from within. Clearing entities for other people doesn't do much. What people have to do is gain the strength within them to not attract that in. It has to come from like their own body has to get to that point. It's like parasites. It's almost like the same thing. So that's a little bit of a short answer to that. So what Tim would do is he's like, is the entity attached to kind of them on the energetic side, like external to them, or is the entity attached in the central nervous system at their core? And how is it attached? And what does it feed on? Does it feed on fear? Like what in the subconscious? Does it feed on guilt, shame, pain, aggression, sexuality? Like what energy that you're not tapping into and that is being suppressed, is it living off of? Is it like using for its ability to be there? It's the unrecognized. So he recognizes it, he looks at it, and then he kind of, and this is something we can do in meditation. Anybody can do this through practice and attempts, is tries to energetically remove it, see how it's connected, why it's connected, and then, remove it through, how is it connected? What can I use to clear these connections? He'll do it with, maybe he'll like psychically burn it away. I would do it with a remedy. Essentially, I think we're always working on and clearing this kind of thing with people. And it really helps in cases when there's a good spiritual opening. And to me, that's just love, forgiveness, openness, an ability to let things go, an ability to trust the universe, to trust your higher self. And if that's there, that is immensely useful for clearing some of this stuff. I'm sure a ton of you have a lot to say here, since I just opened up a can of worms. So I have a lot of Solanaceae cases. What I'll do is maybe cover these and post them online, because I don't want to take you guys over time too much. Let's see, are there any kind of, I have mild cases of stramonium where there's just fear of the dark and then, doing better in school. Intense, a mom who needs stramonium and feeling victimized and paranoid that the government was going to take her child away, and then she needed stramonium to help her with that fear, like that paranoid fear that the government's going to take my child. I have, padded room psych meds cases in here. There's this one case where I have kind of the blue text in here. It's written up because it's really representative of this kind of trajectory of cases that I was speaking to you about, where we start by unlocking the deep inflammation going on. That's the deepest layer. And we're doing belladonna, stramonium, hyos, reptile remedies, tarantula, nosodes, where it's all kind of locked in there. And then it's almost like the energy no longer has to worry about survival, but all of the emotions that were traumatized by the survival then need to be healed. And so then you have to heal the emotional state of the grief and the sadness and the heart shut down, and you're giving carcinosin and ignatia and staphysagria and all the things that were kind of suppressed. So this case is that a couple cases in here have Chiari malformation. And what Chiari malformation is when the brain is so swollen that it goes and pushes itself out through the bottom of the skull. So it creates, basically it's a brain hernia. Sounds awful, and it is. And these kids are, in fight or flight. They can't, they will pull their legs up all the time, because to stretch out their nervous system hurts, because it's like everything is just they're in a chronic like inflammatory encephalitis like state. So this kid did well with all the remedies, hyostramonium, belladonna. And eventually we moved to ignatia and stramonium, or ignatia and carcinosin, and then eventually clearing some parasites, so this is not uncommon. It's very common to see this if you're working on pandas and special needs cases. This mom could actually teach. She became so well versed in homeopathy, she started to practice. So it was great, and her kids did great. This child also was angry at his brother when his brother was born, and that was his biggest trigger. So I started on hyos. Okay, so yeah, crazed dog, laughing like a fool, demonic possession. You can think of these remedies. Lycinum is, rabies. You can think of if it's a crazed dog, but hyos is what helped here. I want to share just a calcar belladonna case. This was a kid who was kind of toddler age, had a lot of bad colds, had a lot of ear infections, had a bad reaction to shots, and then was put into a calc carb state. She was just kind of anxious all the time, really stubborn, but really weakened. And I gave her calc carb and she did great. And then just started tantruming off, you know, red in the face. And so is belladonna after that. And that can be a common combination in kids. The one really good tobacco case that I had was chronic, was actually someone who was Native American. And it was, the Native Americans have such a historical use of tobacco, and I thought it was so amazing, but he had nausea all the time. The nausea was hell for him. And there's a lot of talk of genocide, exile, and that remedy helped him. Capsicum, this was a, capsicum case where there were rages causing inflammation all in the back of the head, tugging on the ears, and capsicum helped. I had a little girl, she was Latina, and she was an angry chili pepper. She was one spicy little girl, and she just got angry at everything. And it was hilarious and angry. Like, she was just red hot face, and they couldn't calm her down at school. And it was cute because she was the cutest little girl. And it was just a funny situation where it kind of made people laugh, but she would intimidate her friends, she wasn't speaking as much as she should. She was shy and angry all the time. She would just get mad. And she liked, I was like, I muscle tested capsicum, and I asked the mom, I was like, does she like eat chili? And she's like, oh yeah, she likes chili. So I was like, anyway, she did great. She stopped being angry and she stopped pulling on her ears. And you guys saw my mandragora case. So I'm 11 minutes overboard, but what I like to do is just, because we covered so much, and because it's Day of the Dead, someone wrote, my boy has a 14 millimeter Chiari malformation. It occurs in 20% of the population. Wow. But severe malformations are less common, coinciding with an inability to speak. Okay, wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So know that case, the Chiari malformation healed. He went to his neurologist. The neurologist was blown away. A Neuroprotect is a really anti-inflammatory supplement. Really helped them as well. That's how it's spelled. So we did, just homeopathy, essential oils, and Neuroprotect, and his Chiari was gone. So, okay. Hope you guys aren't too overloaded here. Let's just do a meditation. What I want to do is take a deep breath in and out. I went through a lot. I'm going to show you pictures of some of the less well-known nightshades. And we're going to, let's just see, just kind of take this in. This is a datura plant. This is funny. This is the cork tree, and it has the combination of the light and the dark in it because I think it was stripped down. That's in this family. This plant is Franciscia. This Hoitzia is in the family. Goji berries is in that family. Tomatoes. This amazing plant called bog bean or Menianthes is in it. Black nightshade, looks kind of deadly, is in it. And this is what came up when I looked up potato plant, and I'm like, is that what the potato looks like? I feel like I should know this, but this is what came up. So I was like, that's such a pretty flower. I had no idea that the potato had a flower that looked like that. And what is this? This looks awful. I kind of am curious for some of you that have major fungal stuff, if you were to try this remedy, the rotten potato, if it would help for like inflammatory stuff from fungal infection. And ashwagandha, which is supposed to give us the power of 40 horses. I think that's what it means. So just taking all of those remedies in, let's just close our eyes. And taking a deep breath in and out, I want you to go back to your childhood. And I want you to imagine how you felt as a child emotionally, whether it was fear or anger or anxiety or frustration or sadness. And I want you to imagine a time when that experience was not acceptable, that you had to hide it, that you had to stuff it. And I want you to be with that child and bring a little light to his or her heart and say, I'm with you. I see your fears. I see your emotions. I see what you've kept inside. And I love you. And it's okay. And take a big, deep breath with that inner child. And calling on the light of the nightshades, if there's any nightshade that can heal any inflammation associated with what has been suppressed into the shadow. Bringing that plant into your life. And when we say shadow, I want you to now just picture a basement, any basement, and what it was like, what was in that basement. And when you went into the basement, how did you feel? And what was down there? What do you see in the dark when you flip the light switch on? What do you smell in the dark? And just bringing that light of awareness to that fear, to that subconscious. In honor of today, I want you to call on some family member that you love dearly. Perhaps a grandparent, perhaps someone who's passed. And connect to their soul, remember their name. And ask them to guide you with their light, to bring love into your life, to shed light on your family, on its trauma, on its past. And I want you to connect to them and tell them you don't forget them, that you will not forget them, that you honor them, that they are a part of you. And breathe in and out, and all the fear in the world right now, all the trauma. Just breathing love and light. Using the energy of our group to breathe love and light onto this planet, into the shadow. Not judging it, not judging what is right, what is wrong. Bringing love, acceptance, and awareness. Forgiveness. Whatever makes you angry right now, just forgiving it. It has no hold over you. And just connecting back into your heart, taking a deep breath in and out. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. Thank you, guys. So that class warmed me up, and I'd really like you guys, it's Day of the Dead today, to remember your ancestor who came to you in that meditation, and find a picture of them, light a candle, remember your youth, remember who you were as a kid, honor your inner child, honor her fears, her nightmares, have compassion for them, and be a mother to them. And if anything kind of came up interesting for you, feel free to share it. I see there's lots of things in the chat. Okay. Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Great class. So I will stop the recording right now. And gosh, are we going to have a new president? We'll see next time we talk. I'm not sure what we'll talk about. But have a wonderful week. Let's make some parasite remedy formulations if needed. Let's try some new Solanaceae remedies, and eat some pumpkin seeds at the same time. All right, love you guys, and talk to you again soon. All right, good night.